Welcome back. Well, Adam Somyurek has labelled it one of the biggest political scandals in Victoria's history. During the 2014 state election, the Labor Party used hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money as taxpayers to pay parliamentary staff to campaign for them in marginal seats. The whole affair cost more than $1 million, including Labor fighting right up to the High Court to try and keep the story out of the media. The Victorian Ombudsman found the scheme broke all the parliamentary rules, but no charges have yet been laid. Yesterday, a twist no one saw coming. A motion put forward by former Andrews Government Minister Adam Somyurek to refer the red shirt scandal to Victoria's corruption watchdog passed the upper house. Daniel Andrews has been requested by the media this week to comment on allegations made by Mr Somyurek and his motion to the Parliament, but has refused to answer questions or provide a response. In a Sky News exclusive, I sat down with Adam Somyurek earlier today at his office in the Victorian Parliament. What he told me about the red shirt scandal and Premier Daniel Andrews' government was nothing short of extraordinary. Adam Somyurek, thank you for your time. Some will say, I think even the Premier, you're jilted, you're out for revenge, but it takes a lot of courage to refer not just your former party, but your own conduct to the anti-corruption watchdog. Why did you do it?
This is serious business. It's not a game. The matters before IBAC at the moment will be dispatched. They're just small things to do with my electoral officers running errands. But this is systematic corruption. Timesheets. 6 months of timesheets or so, I can't remember how many, signed. It is systematic fraud. We had 25 MPs lent on, told that they weren't playing by, they weren't team players if they didn't take part in this scheme, signing fraudulent documents essentially, handing over their staff to a campaign office to campaign for the Labor Party. So we collectively, systematically, stole, they say 400,000, I reckon it's probably more than that. And you've got to call it for what it is. We effectively stole the 2014 state election.
So this wasn't just a couple of rogue MPs. You're saying it was orchestrated, it was across the board. The Premier says he wasn't aware of it. How plausible is that?
Look, I don't think anyone believes it. But people like me and other MPs, and the other 24 MPs will tell you too, but they can't tell you because they're still a part of they're part of Andrews' team. But I'm not. So I can tell the truth now. He was never meant to be leader. He was a backroom boy. He was a head office official. He's a factional apparatchik. There was a split in 2008 where Shorten and Conroy did a deal with the left. Tim Holding, who was seen to be a rising star and groomed to take over from Brax or Brumby, all of a sudden he was on the wrong side of a factional deal. So the factional deal when Brumby lost was delivered, the leadership was delivered to Daniel Andrews.
Do you think Victorians know the truth of what really happened inside the Labor Party in that campaign?
They don't, and as I said, I'm an unusual circumstance here because I'm no longer in the party. No one else is going to say that, but they will have to in front of IBAC. Right? They'll be compelled to talk in front of IBAC, and this is a difference here. The Ombudsman, did a thorough investigation, but the problem is she had no coercive powers. And she couldn't subpoena documents, but IBAC can do all of that.
You say that Labor MPs were instructed not to talk to the police.
Yes, we were advised not to talk to the police. I mean, when you're talking to an MP, you can't really instruct, but we were advised strongly to do a no comment. No, if they come and grab you, do a no comment interview.
But if there's nothing to see here, if people have done the right thing, why would you be scared about talking to the police?
That's always been my sort of. I'm not a lawyer, but that's how I approach life. But the fact is, if you're in a collective and you're receiving advice from the lawyers of that collective, you need to stay close to that.
You say the buck should have stopped with Daniel Andrews, so why hasn't it?
probably because someone like me hasn't actually come out and explained the pressure. I'm no longer in the Labor Party, so I now can. And I've got to say, it takes a special type of character not to stand up and say, look, it's not my MPs, that was me, I'm responsible. That is leadership.
You wrote in the Herald Sun yesterday that when he was opposition leader at this time, he pushed the boundaries, absolutely pushed the boundaries beyond what was acceptable, and that he compromised MPs. That's a big claim. What evidence do you have?
Well, I spoke to him. I spoke to him. And I know other MPs did too.
Last night, you were able to convince a serving member of the Labor Party to support your anti-corruption motion. How did you do that?
Oh, look, she's an intelligent woman. She's made an assessment and decided to do the right thing.
She made the point, though, and I thought this was really strong in her statement that she issued, that she is a migrant to Australia.
Yep.
And she believed when she came here that no one was above the law. She feels that there hasn't been justice served here, and that's why she supported you.
Yep. Look, I haven't had a chance to really have an in-depth conversation with Kushala, but she's a woman of conviction, and she, you know, she's got a good sense of right and wrong, and I'm glad she did the right thing.
Do you believe the Ombudsman, now that there's this referral from the Parliament, will take this further?
Well, this is the thing. I think what first time around, when the Ombudsman got this inquiry, if she had thought that there was reasonable grounds of corruption, she had to go to IBAC, right? She probably initially thought, she probably didn't understand the scale of what she was dealing with, because she treated it as a normal, you know, breaching of entitlements, right? And so she went...
So contained to a couple of MPs as opposed to across the board?
I think it just grew the more she looked at it. Because she treated it, you know, she didn't report it to IBAC. She went and tested her jurisdiction with the Supreme Court when the Andrews government reacted to it, and then the Andrews government sort of appealed it all the way to the High Court. And let's be clear here, I was supporting the Andrews government at that stage, barracking that we wouldn't have to go out and sort of be answerable to the obvious sort of corrupt behaviour that we all engaged in. But at that stage, maybe she should have thought, well, I should now look at this as corrupt and go to IBAC. She didn't. Then the Andrews government then sought exclusive cognizance, which means that she can't look at the lower house because it was an upper house motion. At that point, maybe she should have then decided that we should go to IBAC. And then when we didn't talk to her, maybe she should have at that stage decided that it was corrupt and go to IBAC. She didn't do any of those. But what's interesting is with Operation Watts and my staff members occasionally picking up envelopes during the day, right? Or picking up a membership form of someone. Now that's viewed as serious corruption. So that doesn't gel with me why something systematic and the biggest political scandal in Victoria's history, which the Ombudsman called an artifice, why that doesn't classify as serious corruption, and running errands randomly does. So I think the Ombudsman, if we send this inquiry back to the Ombudsman, I think she's had a reassessment of what this means. I think she'll decide that it is corruption, and she'll probably want coercive powers to be used so she can actually speak to the MPs.
When the Andrews government, though, after this report was provided, when they spent about $1 million all the way to the High Court to stop the media reporting this Ombudsman's report into the Red Shirt scandal, didn't that tell you something?
Well, yes, well, we knew. I mean, us MPs, we were extremely concerned. We were very concerned. It was traumatic for us, I can tell you. There was a brave face put on, but we were very concerned, and I can tell you what the MPs are thinking of Daniel and him not taking ownership of this. They're not happy at all.
So when someone heavies you, though, as an MP and says, here is 6 months' worth of timesheets for taxpayer-funded staff, please, mate, just sign them all off. You know that it's going to pay for campaign staff. You know that it's not inside the rules, surely. Didn't anyone push back?
I did. In fact, what I said at IBAC is I've got emails, and the Commissioner said, "Oh no, we don't need to look at that." So I push back. I push back as much as I can. You've got the Leader of the Upper House, John Lenders, very close to Daniel Andrews, his right-hand man, and he would rock up to your door every day, saying, "Where are the forms? How can we fill it out?" And you say, "John," I said to him, "John, I want Parliamentary Services. I want a letter from Parliamentary Services." He would say, "No." I say, "Has it been ticked off?" And he would say, "Yes." And it's just like an extension of the pooling arrangements that we've always had.
You just said that John Lenders, who was the architect of this model, was his right-hand man. What about the argument perhaps that Lenders was rogue and Andrews didn't know?
You can't have your right-hand man, especially someone like Daniel, who's a Stalinist, to have anyone going rogue on him from the leadership. There is absolutely no way. His Chief of Staff, his Deputy Chief of Staff, they all knew about it. So everyone knows about it but him. How does that work? So that's why we need IBAC, right? We need IBAC to get people under oath. Right? That's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this. This is not going to go away. The biggest political scandal in Victoria's history doesn't just go away, especially when it flips an election.
Yeah, well, that's the point, isn't it? It's not just the $400,000 of staff wages, the $1 million or so spent all the way to the High Court to fight it. It's the fact that it turned the election result, many would argue, in 2014.
Well, Labor Party were boasting about their new technique that won the election for them before the red shirt scandal, before it was uncovered.
Why is Daniel Andrews so powerful? I mean, I've been in politics much of my adult life. I don't think I've come across a political individual like him. You weren't just a minister in his government. You're a fellow power broker for many years. Why is he so powerful?
I think he's as powerful, as imposing as you allow him to be. If you've got power over Daniel Andrews, he's very agreeable, very cooperative. Very, very cooperative and agreeable. But if he senses that weakness, and if he's got power over you, watch out. That's all I can say. And at the moment, he's got total domination of the party because the party doesn't exist. Polls, if the polls are going good, he will be an imposing figure. If the polls are going bad, you will see a different Daniel Andrews, a much more humble Daniel Andrews, and that reflects his caucus engagement as well. He will be sitting, having coffee with caucus members, totally engaging with them, open door. But when the polls are going well, he just doesn't want to know anyone.
People say he is motivated by the polls. The polls determine what he does in Victoria. How true is that?
He's a head office guy. He loves the research. He's driven by research.
You've described him as dictatorial and dangerous. I've had conversations with a number of current serving Labor MPs who say the same thing, use those same words. They're not brave enough to go on the record. Why is he so ruthless?
I think there is pathology there, I really do. But again, as I say to you, if he doesn't have the power over you, there is a different Daniel Andrews. That can be quite engaging. And he's pragmatic too. He's really pragmatic. I've beat him many times in my factional dealings, and he'll just rock up, dust himself off, so you won that one, let's go. But he'll store it for revenge when he can get the revenge. So he's very Machiavellian in that respect. But in terms of, if he's got the power over you, if he feels confident, the polls are in his way, he will absolutely milk that for what it's worth. But there is another Daniel Andrews too. And people will see, when the polls start going south, you will see the new Dan.
You've made the point in and around the hotel quarantine fiasco in Victoria and the 800 dead, that if they hadn't scrapped, or if he hadn't scrapped proper processes, legitimate caucus engagement, the cabinet government in Victoria, if they hadn't been pushed aside, there may well never have been those deaths. Talk to me about how he runs his government.
Well, no self-respecting cabinet minister would have walked into cabinet that proposal knowing
the proposal for private security.
Private security, knowing the reputation of the private security industry. We had a report out not long before that, which show that there were immense problems with that particular industry. So no minister would have walked that proposal in. If they did, they would have been laughed out of cabinet.
So why was he allowed to get away with scrapping cabinet government? Where were the cabinet ministers holding firm?
He rocked up one day and he said that, well, in terms of the crisis cabinet, just one day he came into cabinet and said, "This is what I've done." And people weren't happy, but people acquiesced. People weren't happy at all.
So you tried, but you know, you say there's no one really in the current system, the parties in administration, with the gravitas to speak truth to power.
There is no one in the Labor caucus at the moment that can speak truth to him. Now that the party's been suspended, I don't think there is anyone that can hold him to account, because all he needs to do is speak to Albo to say, "This is what I need as the Premier," and you'll get it done.
So if no one can speak frankly to him, if no one can say, you know, no to Daniel Andrews, if there's no one with any gravitas that he will listen to, how worrying is that for Victorians?
It's very worrying, because it's not just politically, it's obviously with the public service too. You know, modern government is very, very complex. Right? You need specialised skills, and he just goes with his gut. That's what happened with hotel quarantine. You don't need yes people beside you. You need people that are, you know, that are experienced, that are experts, and you've got to take expert advice.
You've seen the inside of the Labor machine. You've seen the inside of the Andrews government. Does the Premier have too much power?
Oh, my word, he does. My word, he does. Look, in our system, we lack the checks and balances. This is not a US presidential system, right? The executive is drawn from the legislature. The checks and balances aren't there. So when you've got an executive that dominates the legislature, you've got a problem.
What will happen if Anthony Albanese wins at the federal election? You've got two left Labor politicians in power, then Daniel Andrews in Victoria, Anthony Albanese in Canberra. What happens then?
The right's in a lot of trouble. I think the right won't come back for a very long time. I think the ALP's in a lot of problems. I think the party will move way to the left. It will move to the left. I think electorally they won't be as viable.
And what does that mean for Australians?
Well, it means that the outer suburbs will be imposed inner city left-wing policy prescriptions. That's what it means.
This has been raised with me a number of times. People have concern about the integrity of institutions in Victoria. They say that in a number of institutions it should be a check and balance on power in the Parliament, power in the executive, that there's not just Labor loyalists there, that there are loyalists to the Premier.
A manifestation of the Premier or the government putting mates or Labor Party activists loyal to the socialist left into the departments and agencies is that when something different happens, you tend to think, well, I'm not sure that I trust that particular institution anymore, which I should not doubt, by the way, which should be beyond question.
Given what you've told me about Daniel Andrews' power, his factional control, if he wins the election in November, what does that look like for Victorians?
I think we've got a real problem on our hands. I think we've got a real problem on our hands. I made a reference to Tammany Hall yesterday. You know, he's introduced a spoils system, basically. That was tried another time, another jurisdiction, not another place.
Explain that for people that don't understand Tammany Hall.
Well, what it's about is this. And what you've got with Daniel Andrews is a patronage network. He's gutted the bureaucracy. He's gutted the government instrumentalities. He's put loyalists in there. So that's the spoils system. We don't have a spoils system in the bureaucracy. The political appointments, which are, an integral part of all democracies in the world, that's different. They come and go with the politicians. But the bureaucracy is meant to be merit-based and totally objective. Give frank and fearless advice, and there needs to be continuity in the bureaucracy. That corporate memory needs to be retained, but it's completely killed that corporate memory. It's put loyalists in there, right? So that is the spoil system, where a government comes in and completely guts the people that are meant to be giving him expert, frank and fearless, objective advice, right? That it leads to corruption. That leads to loss of confidence, or loss of trust in the government, in the institutions, and that's what happened in Tammany Hall in the US. So there's a reason why the spoil system didn't work in the bureaucracy, because it led to corruption. That's where we're going, right? That's exactly where we're going if he's not stopped. With a bit of luck, this motion might sort of hold him up a little bit.
The world's most lengthy lockdown, 6 lockdowns, crippling business, particularly in the Melbourne CBD. Do you think the result might have been different if there'd been proper processes, if there'd been a cabinet government? Absolutely.
Like I said to you, hotel quarantine would not have happened. It just would not have happened. A minister would not have walked that through. You sat around the cabinet table. What do? When a proposal comes to you, it goes to all the other ministers. Everyone has an input before it even gets to cabinet. And your department does, ministers do, they talk to each other, they ring each other and say, look, I'm not happy with this. What's this all about, right? It would not have even got to cabinet. The proposal would not have even got to cabinet. But when you don't have collective decision making, that means that 22 people around the cabinet table, that's 44 eyes. That's the ministerial advisors and the departments who look and scrutinise legislation, scrutinise policy documents. Well, when you don't have all that scrutiny, when you don't have that collective decision making, you don't have that scrutiny. So what happens? Mistakes are made, and that's something he doesn't understand.
There you go. That is just the tip of the iceberg. That's all the lawyers would let me put to air tonight, but that is explosive in itself. I will come back to this issue. I said to you last year and the year before, I am not going to let it go. Right after the break, that new spotlight today on a younger Albanese and his radical wealth